Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our annual workshop on survey methodology. I'm Alexandre Barbosa from the Regional Center for Studies on the Development of the Information Society, Cetic.br, at the Brazilian Network Information Center. This event is jointly organized by Cetic, NIC.br, and the National School of Statistical Science linked to the Brazilian Internet for Geography and Statistics, IBGE. Now, I would like to give the floor to Professor Maísa Magalhães, Principal Researcher and Director of the National School of Statistical Science, to deliver her welcome remarks. Please, Professor Maísa, the floor is yours. Professor Maísa, your mic is muted.
Thank you, Alexandre. First, I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My compliments to the audience and members of this opening ceremony. Welcome to the NIC.br workshop on survey methodology. It's an honor for the National School of Statistical Sciences, ENCE, of the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE, co-organize this event. ENCE offers an undergraduate course in statistics since 1953, graduate courses, master and PhD degrees in population, territory, and public statistics, and as a specialization in environmental analysis and territory management, as well as capacity and training courses through our capacity building department. NIC and ENCE have been partners for several years now to promote scientific research for the application of statistical methodologies in conducting investigations related to the use of information communication technologies in Brazil, as well as fostering mutual methodological exchanges in their respective research activities, jointly participating in academic forums here and abroad, and co-authoring the publication of research results. This cooperation has been very fruitful for ENCE, since NIC.br has a wealth of real-world challenges and issues which ENCE researchers have been helping to find appropriate solutions. In April of this year, the Statistics Division of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and IBGE signed a Memorandum of Understanding of the Regional Hub for Big Data in Brazil in support of the United Nations Global Platform. The main objective of the Regional Hub in Brazil are the facilitation of projects in the use of big data and data science for official statistics and sustainable development goals indicators, the sharing of knowledge on newly developed methods, algorithms, and tools, and the provision of training in the use of big data and data science for the community of official statisticians in the Central and South American region. ENCE is coordinating this project. An annual work program was prepared with the collaboration of a technical group and with the support of an advisory group formed by specialists from different countries. Both groups have NIC.br members collaborate and contribute with their expertise. Finally, I wish that all participants enjoy a great and profitable meeting, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Maísa, and congratulations for the agreement signed with the UNSD to host the Big Data Hub here in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, by ENCE. It is indeed a great achievement, and we at NIC.br we are sure that this big data hub will be a very relevant data source with a different data sets for research, for public policy making. So I'm very happy with this new. Congratulations. And for us, it's an honor to be part in this two committee for the Big Data Hub hosted by ENCE. Well, as you said, we have been collaborating for many years now, and it is a great honor to us at NIC.br and Cetic.br to have the National School of Statistical Science as our partner, not only in this event, but in so many projects that we are conducting. Now I would like to invite Professor Demi Getico, CEO of NIC.br, to address his welcome remarks. Thank you very much, Professor Demi, for being with us. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. I'll take the opportunity of the interpretations to deliver my short salutation in Portuguese and say good morning and good afternoon to everybody. So I will be following in Português. Prezados, bom dia, boa tarde a todos. É a 11ª semana de metodologia do Cetic e do NIC, e é uma alegria ver essa pleia de amigos especialistas no tema reunidos em torno dessa semana, que na verdade é a pedra de toque da qualidade dos dados que o Cetic produz, e isso é reconhecido por todos que participam da semana e que assistem a ela. Então, eu não tenho dúvida que teremos de novo um excelente conjunto de apresentações e que serão extremamente úteis para manter a qualidade ilibada dos dados que o Cetic publica e a imagem que nós temos tentado preservar. Então, mais uma vez, muito obrigado pela presença de todos, muito obrigado pelo convite de estar aqui presente nesse evento, e tenhamos todos um belo workshop nessa parte de metodologia. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Professor Demi.
Muitíssimo obrigado, professor Demi. E é claro que com o apoio do NIC.br e também do CGI.br na produção de estatísticas TIC de modo regular hoje, nós estamos cobrindo tantas áreas de mensuração, então o apoio é realmente essencial para continuarmos nosso trabalho. E também para o apoio de diferentes atividades de capacitação, como a que estamos iniciando hoje. Tudo isso é de extrema relevância para uma ampla gama de stakeholders, não apenas quem faz as políticas, mas também pesquisadores, sociedade civil. Então, muitíssimo obrigado por estarem aqui hoje conosco. Então, muito brevemente, vou falar sobre este workshop. A maioria de vocês já conhece esse workshop, nós fazemos há vários anos. Essa é a nossa 11ª edição, pelo 11º ano de atividades regulares. Este workshop é realizado desde 2010 para discutir temas emergentes sobre a produção de dados e estatísticas dentro da comunidade de dados de TIC, reunindo produtores de dados e usuários de dados, como formuladores de políticas, pesquisadores acadêmicos, setor privado, várias empresas de alta tecnologia. Elas se apoiam ou usam nossas estatísticas para tomar suas decisões, e também atores não governamentais. Então, este evento faz parte do nosso programa de capacitação, que tem aqui o Cetic.br, também com workshops regionais realizados em países da América Latina.
Of them, we have the support of the UNICLAC, CEPAL, in Chile, that help us to disseminate methodological issues, statistical procedures in the region with our neighbor countries. And we also have some massive online open courses, such as the one that we have developed in partnership with UNESCO and the SDG Academy in New York, called Tech for Good, the role of ICTs in achieving the SDGs. This MOOC is running for 3 years now. We have more than 5,000 people join this course from everywhere. It is available in 3 languages, Portuguese, Spanish, and English, on the edX platform. And more recently, we started a new MOOC project, also with UNESCO and the Future Society, on artificial intelligence and the rule of law. It is a program target the judiciary actors, and this will be launched in December this year in 7 languages, the 6 UN official languages plus Portuguese. So in this opportunity, this year edition, we are going to have 3 webinars starting today. So the first webinar, webinar 1, it's going to be on data collection, innovation, and dissemination for estimation of ICT indicators and price index. We have a colleague from Cetic and a colleague from IBGE that will explain how we are going to adopt innovation procedures in data production. Tomorrow, we will have our second webinar on big data and official statistics. It's going to be a very, very interesting and innovative webinar tomorrow with our academics from the Netherlands and also from the Netherlands statistics. And on the last day, on Thursday, webinar number 3 on international projects on artificial intelligence, and we have invited international organizations leading with artificial intelligence projects and the implications for measurement, for data production. So we are going to have OECD, UNESCO, the International Center for AI, IRCAI, which is also a brother center from Cetic in Slovenia. IRCAI is also a UNESCO Category 2 center, and we are going to have the Center for the 4th Industrial Revolution that is also involved in AI projects. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Denise Brits from the National School of Statistical Science, who will introduce our guest speakers today and will moderate today's webinar. Denise, it's a real pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for having accepted our invitation to moderate the first day of our webinar. So with that, I wish all of you a very productive and interactive webinar. Thank you very much. Denise, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexandre, and thank you very much for the honor of chairing this first day of the webinars. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this year's edition of our workshop. I'm Denise Brits from the National School of Statistical Science, a partner from Ict.br. First, I would like to say that due to the pandemic, we decided to conduct this webinar once again entirely online through a series of 3 webinars addressing the topic innovation and trends on ICT data production. We are quite sure that in 2022, we will be able to return to the traditional form and welcome all of you in São Paulo. We know that the COVID-19 has severely affected the data collection activities, impacting the production of official statistics around the globe. All national statistical offices and data producers face challenges to maintain their output through traditional methods. Innovation, cooperation, and adaptability were key to enable them to continue producing reliable data and information to meet the user's needs. The pandemic crisis has also highlighted the vital role digital technologies play in connecting people and allowing institutions to enable the continuity of labor, education, public services, commerce, and etc. The 11th edition of the NIC.br workshop on survey methodology will showcase and discuss innovative methodologies and explore new data sources to address complex issues in the domain of ICT data production to bridge these gaps. The disruption of data production caused by the COVID-19 crisis certainly presented challenges, but also created new opportunities. Some trends on the production of statistics will be addressed by the speakers in our today's session. Before we start our session, I would like to announce the procedures for online interaction for this virtual workshop. The format of each webinar is composed of 2 sessions of keynote presentations with 50 minutes, plus a Q&A session of 15 minutes. It will run from today to Thursday, always from 10 a.m. to 12:30, São Paulo time. Simultaneous translation is available for Portuguese and English. You please select the preferred language in the globe icon in your screen. Please check that your microphones are always muted once the workshop starts, and use the chat for raising questions or comments to the speakers. We will be organizing all the questions, and in the 15-minute sessions, Q&A sessions, we will read the questions to the speakers. Note, please, that the meeting will be recorded for report writing purposes. We will start our first webinar with 2 presentations on data collection, innovation, and dissemination for estimation of ICT indicators and price indices. The speakers today, we have 2 speakers. The speakers are Marcelo Pita, who is coordinator of quantitative methods and statistics of Cetic.br, and Vladimir Miranda, who leads the methodology unit of the price index coordination at IBGE. More information about our guest speakers is available on the workshop website. You see the picture, click, and there is information about them. I would like to give the floor to Marcelo Pita, coordinator of quantitative methods and statistics at Cetic.br. Marcelo, you have 50 minutes, and I will interrupt you if needed. That's important. 5 minutes before your time is up. The floor is yours, and I wish you a good presentation, and we will be with you here.
Thank you, Denise. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening to everyone. I will share my slides, and I will start my talk with you today. I hope you enjoy it. Well, today I will present to you 2 experiences we had at Cetic during the year of 2020, during the pandemic scenario. Collecting data, estimation, and dissemination changed a lot last year because of the scenario of the pandemic. I would like to highlight that this effort, it's not an effort that started in 2020. This effort is an effort that Cetic has been doing, the search for new methodologies, to look for new strategies of dissemination. It's a policy in Cetic.br. It's an effort of the whole people that work at Cetic.br, particularly the quantitative methods team, the consultants Pedro and Denise Silva, and especially our manager, Alexandra, and the NIC.br and the CGI directors and counselors. My presentation, I will start with a little bit of context and past experiences we had working with innovative methods. I will talk about a little bit about the impact of COVID pandemic. Then I will explain in more detail 2 experiences of data production during the year of 2020. And the last but not least, I will talk about our dissemination and analysis strategies for the future and what we have learned during the last year. Well, Cetic.br is a department of NIC.br. NIC.br is a non-profit organization. NIC.br is the executive branch of CGI.br, the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee. The activities and the foundation of NIC.br and Cetic.br were in 2005, and since then, Cetic.br have been collecting and producing statistics about information, communication, and technology for Brazil. Besides the production of statistics and giving policymakers data to better make decisions, Cetic.br also have a capacity building department. This workshop is part of this policy on capacity building. We also have been participating in a lot of forums, national and international forums, about data collection and production in ICT indicators. Well, as many other public and official statistical offices, during the past 10 years, there's been an increasing demand for timely and disaggregated information. People want information more frequent and disaggregated for small domains. And along with that, every year there's a new demand for information, demand for new indicators, new measurements are needed. But also in the past years, there has been a reduction of the resources available for the traditional statistics production process, for the traditional way of collecting data. And there's been an increase on survey non-response, irrespective of collection mode. It doesn't matter if it is a face-to-face interview or a telephone interview, the response rates have been decreasing in the past years. I need to say that in Cetic.br, we are very lucky because we managed to keep our resources at the same level, and sometimes we were able to increase a little bit the amount of resources we have to do our surveys and to do our data collection and production process. Well, but we needed to fulfill these needs, and we've been studying and conducting studies, innovative studies on collection and production of statistics, and some of them have been presented and some of them have been published in journals, international journals. I will highlight, I will talk about 3 of them. The first one is the study and production of small area estimates for states for our Ict Household Survey, our biggest survey. It's an annual household survey. This study was published in June 2020 in the Journal of the International Association for Official Statistics. In this study, we were able to produce estimates by states, something that's not possible with the use of traditional methodologies and using just the design we planned for our Ict Households Survey. Also, we have a study that was presented last year in the joint statistical meeting that combines a non-probability sample with a probability sample. This was done to lower, as a lower cost alternative to the traditional methods. I don't know clearly why, but quota sampling is a lot cheaper than a probability traditional sample. So we studied the ways to combine those two types of sampling as to have a bigger sample, but with a lower cost. And also, we use administrative records and big data sources. We studied the possibility of collecting data on websites to produce ICT estimates for enterprise. This study was presented in 2018 Statistics Canada International Methodological Symposium, and is available in its proceedings. Well, we learned a lot with those studies, learnings that we carried and used last year. These studies provide insight about challenges, advantages, issues, complexities related to the application of innovative methods for data production in general and for ICT data production in particular. Some experiments that we made did not ended up with results that we could use. The quality of the estimates and the results did not meet our quality standards. But even when the results met good quality, they are complex to explain to the ordinary user, to our data users. This is an issue that's really, really difficult to overcome. We've been using some strategies to explain easily what we have done, but it's not easy for the ordinary user. Well, we plan to continue on this space, studying innovative methods, new types of data collection, new types of indicators. We plan to do that and continue to do that during the year of 2020. For instance, we redesigned our ICT on Education survey and our ICT on Health survey in order to have estimates for states, something that was not possible in past waves, 2019, 2018, 2017. But with in the pandemic scenario, things had changed. And we face a scenario where traditional face-to-face interviewing was not possible for most surveys during 2020 and the early of 2021. Telephone interviewing with enterprises, schools, health facilities, other target populations of Cetic.br became more difficult. We saw an increase on non-response rates for all of these surveys we carried out last year. And plus all of that, the dams of study of Cetic.br that are access, use, and appropriation of internet technologies is correlated to the new way of life and to the possibility of becoming a respondent to Cetic.br survey. Since we cannot do face-to-face interviewing, we need to contact people through telephone or web. And those types of interviewing are very correlated to the dam of study of Cetic.br. But this scenario didn't stop us, and Cetic.br developed a contingency plan to collect and publish ICT statistics during the pandemic scenario. The information about internet use and the way people are dealing in the pandemic scenario, once you cannot even go out, was very important and very needed by the policymakers. So we planned I will present two experiences and two surveys we conducted last year. The first one is a panel survey with internet users. And the second one is the telephone data collection for the traditional ICT household surveys. As I said, we plan to do the surveys in 2020 as usual, but without the possibility of face-to-face interview, we needed to change the data collection for our traditional ICT household survey to a telephone interview mode. Starting with the non-probability sampling of the panel survey, we looked in the market for a web panel of individuals, and based in what we found, the target population defined for our panel was internet users aged 16 years and older in Brazil. The target domains we desire for that survey were sex, education, region, age group, and economic status, not cross-classified. The frame used for this panel were two: a panel of individuals obtained from the market research companies, as I said, but we needed to complement that panel with a telephone list in order to reach a population with lower income and lower levels of education. The sample design for the panel was a quota sampling based on the same variables we desired as target domains. But we don't work with non-probability samples. We usually work with probability samples in order to have the possibility of evaluate the quality of our estimates and how we can transform a non-probability sample into a probability sample. There are some ways we can do that. And based on our study, when we study the combination of a non-probability sample with a probability sample, we chose to use a methodology of calculating pseudo-weights. This methodology uses a reference probability sample as an anchor in order to estimate those pseudo-weights. The survey we used as a reference was our last traditional survey, the Ict Household Survey of 2019. The target population for this survey is the permanent private households and their residents aged 10 years or more in Brazil. The total sample size is around 30,000 interviews each year. The frame used for this survey is the Brazilian NSO census enumeration areas. And the sample design is stratified, clustered, and with a lot of stages of selection. In order to combine the non-probability survey and the probability survey, some conditions need to be met. Both surveys needed to be conducted in the same reference period. Both surveys need to target the same, need to have the same target population. Both surveys need to have a group of questions made in the same way, with the same options. And a respondent of one sample cannot be a respondent on the other sample. Well, in our case, the reference period is different. We don't have we are not certain both samples address the same target population, but we managed to have the same questions in the panel as we did in the Ict households of 2019, a group of questions, basic questions. And as the population of Brazil is very big, we believe it's not possible, or it's very difficult to have the same respondent in the two samples. In order to overcome the difference in these conditions, the approach used to weight this panel and made it a probability sample, we first updated the size of the target population, internet users aged 16 years and older, using data collected by the Ict Household Survey 2019, combined with data from Brazilian NSO, the Quarterly Labor Force Household Survey. It's a very big survey. We evaluated and identified the population represented by respondents of the web panel among those in the target population, building a predictive model for internet use with data from Ict household surveys. We estimate the propensity of being internet users in the Ict household survey 2019 and use this model to estimate the propensity of being an internet user for the respondents of the panel. And we estimate pseudo-inclusion probabilities for the non-probability sample, also through a modeling, through a logistic regression model, and use the inverse of this propensity of pseudo-inclusion probability as a weight, a basic weight, considering thresholds defined by the propensity scores of internet use. We combined the two models, the propensity of being internet user and the propensity of being the probability sample, given that the respondent is a respondent of the non-probability sample. The results were evaluated according to calibration factors. We calibrated these basic weights through known totals of the NSO household survey, and we evaluate also through experts' knowledge about some items of the question. All this complexity of weighting estimation leads us and gives us one easy way to calculate variances. And the variances are estimated through bootstrap. It's a methodology that replicates weights. So in the end, you have a database with the weight of each respondent and hundreds of other replicate weights. These other replicate weights are used to estimate the variances and the margins of error. We learn a lot with this experience. The advantages were that data was collected avoiding face-to-face interviews. The whole survey, from planning to publishing survey results, took less than 2 months to complete. The cost of data collection, the cost of the production of the indicators was a lot cheaper than a traditional face-to-face survey. But there were some disadvantages too. The web panel recruitment is not meant to be representative of the target population. The target population is not necessarily the same. In our case, internet users. Coverage issues remain, despite using a probability survey as a reference for weighting. At the end, when we used the model to calculate the propensity of being internet user for the respondents of the panel, we verify that the panel just covered part of our target population, a little more than 80%. So the results of our panel survey were results that were indicators that meant to cover just part of the population, not the whole target population we desire in the beginning. The approach is model dependent. We used 2 models in order to be able to weight the survey. We were lucky. We found 2 good models, but good models may not always be available. And as you may already noticed, to explain this methodology, to disseminate this methodology and the results is very complex. The second experience we did last year was the Ict Household Survey of 2020. As I said before, we planned to carry out traditionally with face-to-face interviews, but it was not possible in the second semester of last year. So we went for a telephone interview. But how we did that? The target population of the survey is the same as in the past waves of the survey. Permanent private households and their residents aged 10 years and older in Brazil. As frame, we used all the respondents of Ict household surveys from 2017, 18, and 19 that provided a valid telephone number. More than 50,000 contacts are in this frame. The sample design is the same sample design used in the last surveys. These surveys use the same sample design since 2015. So even the frame is a collection of past frames of past respondents, the sample design is the same. We started to contact those respondents, those past respondents in October of 2020. And we tried until April 2021. But only 7% of the respondents in the frame effectively responded to the survey. And there was an indication of bias towards individuals with higher economic status, a bias towards more connected households, and a bias towards individuals that are more connected, more internet active. We try to correct this bias with a lot of weighting methodologies. Even we try to use pseudo-weighting to correct for this differential non-response, but the results were not successful. So we only had one option, to collect an additional sample through face-to-face interviewing based on a small subsample of the frame used. Well, what we did, first, we split our frame into separate databases. One with the enumeration areas with at least one respondent through telephone interview. And a second part of the database composed of enumeration areas with no respondents in the phase of telephone interview. We selected among those with no respondents in through telephone interview, 150 enumeration areas, and proceeded the regular face-to-face collection method we have been using for this survey since 2015. The data collection, it's a small sample, was made in 3 weeks, following appropriate sanitary protocols. And the response rate was 72%, the same response rate we've been having in our traditional Ict household surveys since 2015. No change about that. So far, nothing is complex, but again, the weighting is the complex part of this methodology. How did we weight the respondents of this survey? Well, the weighting was obtained from the 2 collection modes separately. As I said, to do the face-to-face interview, to select the face-to-face sample, we split the frame in 2. The telephone interview part of the frame was weighted using modeling approaches and propensity score methods, similar to what we did in the panel, similar models, not a similar approach, different view, but similar models. The face-to-face interview part of the database was weighting using traditional inverse selection probability techniques. No problem. The usual we do every year when the year is a regular year. After that, we put together those 2 databases and calibrate for estimated population totals that we, as I've already said, we get from National Household Survey from Brazilian NSO. And the variances are estimated using the same method we used in the panel survey, the bootstrap method. This means we have one weight, that's the weight of each individual respondent in the sample, and a lot of other replicated weights that are used to calculate variances and margins of error. This diagram presents the basic steps of weighting for the Ict Household Survey of 2020. We split the database, considering the modes of data collection, weighting each of them separately, combine them with these basic weights, calibrate, and we have a final database. The modeling adjustments used for the telephone interview were also 2 as in the panel. One, to adjust the weights of the frame, considering the respondents of past waves that informed a valid telephone contact, so as they can be used to estimate the whole population, the whole part of the frame, the ones with contacts, and the ones with no contacts. And after that, we used another model to adjust for the propensity of response to the survey through telephone interview. After that, we joined the two database and finally have good results for this survey. We also learn a lot with this experience. The advantages we can point are that data was collected minimizing face-to-face interviews. And the cost of data collection was cheaper than our traditional face-to-face interview. We realized that to do telephone interviews, to have a sample based on telephone interviews, we need an up-to-date database of telephone contacts. And we are planning to collect that better in our 2021 Ict Household Survey that I hope will be fully face-to-face interview. And it was not possible to evaluate mode effects. Yes, we used telephone interview and face-to-face interview, but the modes were addressed to different parts of our target population. The telephone interview reached the richer part of our target population, and the face-to-face interview reached the poorest part of our target population. So it's not possible to calculate or evaluate mode effects in our case. There were some disadvantages too. Telephone interviews requires shorter questionnaires, and we were not able to collect all the data we usually collect when we go to the field with our Ict Household Survey. The resulting sample is smaller than the traditional sample. The resulting sample was around 5,000 households and individuals. And our regular Ict Household Survey, as I already said, has a sample around 30,000 households and individuals, which means we have a small increase in our variances and margins of error. And again, it's hard to explain the dual mode methodology and estimation and weighting, and it's hard to disseminate our microdata. As many of you may know, our Ict Household Surveys always have their microdata available for download for anyone that wants in our site. In that case, I will explain in the last slide, it will be a different disseminate microdata. Well, so far I've explained two experiences and some studies we've been doing in Cetic.br. One thing that we learn with these experiences is that it's not easy to communicate, to disseminate the methodology. And if you don't understand the methodology, the user may make mistakes when analyzing data from our surveys. So in both experiments, we introduce a more detailed methodology explanation when releasing the results. Concerning the dissemination in our portal, as I said, we published a study about estimating small area indicators, state indicators for Ict households. We have data for states since 2014, but the methodology needed to produce these state estimates combines 2 years of the annual Ict Household Survey plus geography information. So the results of the state estimates are useful, are reliable, but are not direct comparable to the annual estimates. So they could not be put in the same space in our portal. We are planning a new space where we can put our experiments and our differential statistics in order to the user to have a clear experience and see that some things are comparable, some things are not. And they need to go for methodology, enlightenment, to understand the differences. If we put all together in the same place, people can misunderstand the results and make bad comparisons. We plan to give more capacity building events for users of our data. We had a short course last Friday on how to use our microdata that are already available on our portal. And concerning the dissemination of microdata, specifically microdata of our panel surveys and of our last Ict Household Survey, the Ict Household Survey of 2020, we are planning to release them in just one file format, an R object. This object enables using more advanced techniques with easy. Why is that? Those two experiences that I presented today, they used to estimate variance, a methodology called bootstrap that replicate weights. To calculate margins of errors, you need to use a software that can use those replicate weights in the calculation of the indicators. And as far as I know, the only software that is free and can do that is the software R from CRAN. We are planning to release this microdata till the middle of November with a text explaining how to use it and some examples on how to use it. But some knowledge of the software R will be needed in order to effectively use this microdata. I hope you enjoyed and you understood the presentation. Thank you all.
Hello, Marcelo.
Yes.
Many thanks for your enlightenment and for your presentation. And congratulations to the Cetic.br for the work and I have to confess that there's one sentence that you say it's an easy way to calculate variance. And I was thinking, it doesn't look easy. It's just that the team got this challenge and you all faced it and you are providing with new methodology or more than methodology to do it. I don't think it's so easy, but it's just a joke. So I'm here now to conduct the questions and answers, and there is already some. There is at least one question that I can see. So from Fabio, and there is also a new message. So what I will do is I will read the questions that I'm seeing and comments that I'm seeing in the chat on the chat at the moment, and then you please keep adding them because we do have time for questions and answers and comments. So from Fabio, we have estimating mode effects in surveys conducted during the pandemic use alternative methods of collecting seems like an important research agenda for the statistical community. Since there are differences in the profile of respondents between the modes of collections, are hybrid collection methods or mixed collection methods the future of household surveys? Can you answer this one, please?
Yes, we would love to be able to do the comparison between mode effects. I hope we'll be able to do it next year. We don't plan to do this year, but the way to do that is to select a sample, traditional sample, probabilistic sample. And part of this sample we collected through telephone interview, part of this sample we collect through face-to-face interview. But we need to select randomly which respondent will respond one way, which responded will respond the other way. In our case, the experiment, as I said, managed to reach completely different parts of the target population. The profile of the respondent, it's very, very different. And that was good because that was our intention, because part of the population was not represented by only the telephone interview. Just using the face-to-face sample part of the survey, we were able to give the results to the whole target population. We plan to do this study, but it's not something for this year, maybe next year.
Thank you, Marcelo. We have at the moment two questions, one from Flavio from IBGE, and there is one from Ana Laura from Cetic. So I read one and you reply, and then I read the next. And if others come, I will keep reading. We still have time. So first, Flavio was thanking you for the presentation, and he said, regarding data collection, the case of the Brazilian Innovation Survey that came back from IBGE, we have experienced an increase of non-response rates through the last editions. Particularly the last edition, we faced a new obstacle regarding data collection by using telephone interview due to important shifts and greater incorporation of new communication technologies like WhatsApp and meeting platforms. They are becoming even it's becoming even harder not to contact the respondents, but to actually speak with the respondents. People are increasingly avoiding answering telephone calls, and it's making telephone interviewing increasingly difficult. In IBGE, we are and will face this handicap in the years to come, and it's a great challenge to overcome. How do you at Cetic intend to proceed when telephone interviewing becomes even harder?
Well, Flavio, thanks for your question. I talked to the people of IBGE because we faced the same problem last year. Our telephone interviews decreased a lot, the response rate decreased a lot. And I hope the scenario comes back a little bit closer to 2019 in this matter, because we've been trying to reach people and people are not answering. When you reach people, sometimes you need a specific respondent. It's not the manager or the CIO of the company, but you need the IT of the company and you cannot reach him. There's a problem with getting access to cell phone numbers when it's a personal cell phone number. There are a lot of issues that come with the pandemic scenario. I hope we will have to change. I don't know how yet. We keep looking for alternative contacts on the web, on the sites of the companies, but it's not an easy task. It's not an automatic test. We haven't developed a protocol for that. We are studying it, but I don't have a clear answer. I hope things will get better in the next years.
Thank you, Marcelo. There is a comment and a question now about Ana Laura that is related to bias. That's something that you have been dealing and adjusting and modeling for that. And her question is, you mentioned that you could not be sure to what extent the populations were different. What do you think is the reflection and the effects of this limitation on the results of the survey?
In the case of the household survey, there were no limitations because we managed to represent the whole target population. In the case of the panel, we lost part of the population. We were able to produce results for more than 80% of the target population, the more educated ones, the younger ones, but we lost, the results are not valid for the whole target population, but just for a part of it. For that part, the results are reliable and with good quality. Unfortunately, the results need to be addressed and analyzed, taking it into account. When you talk about the results of our panel surveys, you don't talk about the whole population of internet users 16 years and older. You are talking about a part of that population.
Thank you. There is another question, and it's for Mateus. And I'm sorry, Mateus, I cannot realize from where institution you are. If you write in the chat, I will tell you, everybody. His question is, thanks for presentation. You explained why you couldn't do the mode comparison, but were there similar target respondents on both modes? Even if not enough to provide a mode comparison, but some to verify that the answers were similarly given. So it's the idea that how would you compare the mode effect?
Thanks for your question. We haven't had the time to look into it. We had this idea of putting together both modes and try to find respondents in telephone interview part and face-to-face part that are comparable, and then evaluate the mode effect. But we were not able to do that. I don't know if the results will be valid because, as I said, the samples are very small. So the comparable part may be even smaller than that. So we will be, because we need to correct or to control a lot of characteristics as region, urban, rural situation, education level. All of these must be controlled in order to evaluate or to try to measure the mode effect in each answer. We will see, but so far we hadn't had the time to do that.
We do have another question, and I'm just telling everybody that we are continuing with the question and answers because Marcelo didn't use his whole time of the presentation that was supposed to talk about until 11:10, and that's why we are using to the Q&A session. That is very good. It's very lively. So the question from José Antônio Gouveia Galhardo is a question about the sharing of Anatel's telephone data that was tried last year for the PNAD Continua, but faced resistance from the judiciary system. What is NIC's opinion on the possibility of such access of these proprietary data and telephone data?
Thanks for the question, Flavio. I would love to have access to a database like that, but there are some privacy concerns about it, which means that I'm not in favor of the release of the whole data set for companies, private or offshore companies, but imagine we could select a sample of enumeration areas based on NSO, Brazilian NSO enumeration area database, go to the field, annotate each address of the selected enumeration areas, and for each address of the selected enumeration areas, select a sample to be collected, and for that sample of address, we could send these sampled addresses to the operator, and the operator would put telephone numbers just for that sample. So we could try to do a first contact through telephone interview, or even to inform you've been selected for NSO household sample, for NIC.br sample. Would you receive someone at home? It would be great to have that. It's not the entire database, but just information about telephone, no other information. No name, no sex, no gender, no information. Nothing about the value that the respondent or the user is paying, just a phone or more for an address. That would be very, very valuable for us researchers and statistics and so on.
Denise, you are on mute. Denise, you're still muted.
Sorry, I was muted because I was typing for someone in the chat and I didn't want everybody to listen my clack. So now I'm just back to you all, just saying that we have another 2 questions, and then I will do these questions and then we go to the break unless someone. In fact, we have time for 3 questions. So we have 2 and we have time to another one. So there are 2 questions, one from Jorge Veloso from Anatel and another one from Cristiane. So from Jorge Veloso, who says, thanks, Professor Pita, for your excellent lecture. Would you consider gamification of online surveys help to overcome the constraints of telephone surveys, at least for youngers as well as young adults? And then I will go to the other questions after you reply to this one, Marcelo.
Thanks, Veloso, for your question. One thing we learned with this experience is that it's easier to have an answer from a richer household through telephone interview or web interview. So we plan to mix modes in the future, one way or another. Okay, but when it comes to question to younger people, we have the Kids Online Survey. It's also an ICT survey conducted by Cetic.br, and this survey need to be face-to-face because there are a lot of questions that are sensitive questions, and we need to be there face-to-face with the children or the younger, the youth, and with its parents, so we can properly conduct the survey. But we are planning to start using mixed modes in order to increase our response rates. That's it.
Okay, and another question from Cristiane from NIC.br, Ceptro.br. How weighting compensates for the effect of different sampling methods like telephone versus face-to-face? Which of these methods had higher weight?
They share basically the same portion of weighting. We needed to go face-to-face because the telephone interview didn't reach the whole target population that we desired. So the telephone interview was able to get respondents for richer households. The face-to-face interview was directed to reach poorest part of our target population. When we split the database, the initial frame was a database composed of 3 years of ICT households. And those 3 years have their basic weights, and they represent our target population, okay? When we split the database, the telephone interview represented part of this population, and it is responsible to weight just that part. And the face-to-face interview is responsible for the weighting of the other part of our target population. They are basically the same size in terms of numbers, numbers of individuals and number of households, okay? So the weighting procedure just weighted separately so we could represent the target population as a whole, and we just joined them together in order to calibrate the weights, to update the weights to the last National Statistical Office release of the National Households Brazilian Survey.
Okay, so thank you very much for all the audience and for the questions. Thank you, Marcelo, for the great presentation and for showing us all the developments and methodologies, challenges that Cetic.br are facing and really is for the surveys and your work. This was our last question, and I would say that we will stop now for a coffee break, and we will come back at 11:30. Okay? So in 15 minutes. Okay. We are back for our second presentation of the day today. Our presenter is Vladimir Miranda from IBGE. He has been working in our Central Statistical Office Price Index Coordination since 2010, and he currently manages its methodology unit, a unit that deals with the methods for price index and other surveys of the price index coordination. Vladimir, you have 50 minutes for your presentation. Is that okay? Are you with us now?
Denise.
Oh, okay. It's because when, depending on who is on the screen or who is speaking, we don't see you in the screen. So welcome for your presentation, and following our first day of the workshop, we are dealing with innovation and ICT production statistics, production of ICT statistics and price index, and now we have Vladimir Miranda from IBGE.
Okay. So can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes, okay. Very well, perfectly, yeah.
So I first of all would like to thank you very much for the invitation for participating in this meeting, especially Professor Pedro Silva, who made the invitation personally. I'll try to, the title of my presentation is a bit too ambitious. I will talk about the use of alternative data sources for the compilation of price statistics, but not so general as not be so as general as the title intends. I'll focus here more on the use of the web for the compilation of consumer price indices. Okay. So just an outline of the presentation. I'll give a brief introduction on the problem of using alternative data sources for CPIs, then some base aspects of CPIs. Then I'll talk briefly about a contrast of using traditional collection and alternative data sources, some concerns about the use of the web for CPIs, and then I'll focus on the two different approaches, the main approaches used for dealing with the web for CPIs, which are the target approach and the bulk one, and then my conclusions. Okay. Currently, new services, digital services are rising every day, and new modes of commerce that are shaping how consumers are buying. And we have, for instance, the iFood, Uber, Spotify. And as a result of the rise of these services, we also have the rise of new data sources with rich information for the production of price statistics. However, the main message that I would like to send today is that incorporating such sources for the production of price statistics is a problem that can go far beyond just collecting the data. So features such as the source characteristics, the kind of price statistics that you're trying to build, the approach that you are going to adopt for dealing with the data, all these can have an important impact on the use of the data. Okay, so I'll try to bring some of these subjects on the use for the compilation of CPIs. Before getting into the use of the web, I think it's useful to present some basic aspects of consumer price indices, as we have a broad audience here today. So a consumer price index is an indicator that aims to track the price evolution of goods and services consumed by households. It's very present on people's lives since it's very popular. It's always on the news, and people feel the effects of inflation in their budgets. But it's not so trivial how one can devise a CPI measure. So there are different indicators that can be derived according to different approaches, according to different methodologies, and also practical considerations such as the kind of data that you have at hand. So one of the most used frameworks is to build a CPI which aims to track the price evolution of a basket of products of a given population of interest. And this framework is known as the cost of goods approach, is the one that is adopted, for instance, at the national system of CPIs at IBGE, which we will give a more concrete example here. Just an overview of what the system produces. We have four main indicators that produce, four CPI indicators, and they differ by the geographical coverage. The main indicators are the INPC and the IPCA. The other two, IPCA 15 and IPCA E, are derived from the IPCA. There are differences regarding the collection period. The INPC and IPCA are collected from the first to the last day of the reference month. The IPC 15 is from the middle of consecutive month. The periodicity, are mainly monthly. Only the IPCA is quarterly. The target population for the INPC is low-income salaried families, while for the IPCA it's a more broad indicator that considers families with salaries ranging from 1 to 40 minimum Brazilian wages. The main source of weights is the Household Budget Survey, POFI, conducted by IBGE. And there are differences in uses. For instance, the main use of the INPC, one of the main uses, is for the readjustment of pensions and salaries, while the IPCA is the official measure of inflation adopted by Brazilian Central Bank for conducting his monetary policy. So going to more technical details, so moving on how we devise our indicators, one of the first steps is how do we build our baskets. In the case of the SCNPC, the baskets are built from the Household Budget Survey, which visits the households and collects information on the incomes and the expenditures made by those families. And based on this and the target population that we aim, we restrict the expenditures that are most useful for the CPI. Then we select the elements of the basket. Those elements are then classified into a classification system adopted by IBGE, which is here on your right, which has this 4 level of disaggregation going from top to bottom. We get more homogeneous groups, okay? And another key aspect of the CPIs produced by IBGE is that we have the geographical breakdown, where we have a basket for each area, and the indexes are produced for each area according to the different levels of disaggregation of the classification system. And then the national indicator is obtained via unweighted aggregation of the local ones, okay? Another important aspect of a CPI is how do you construct the indicators, okay? We have essentially 2 kinds of formulas that are used at different stages. We have the elementary aggregate formulas and the high level ones. The elementary aggregate is the building block of the CPIs, since it's the lowest level for which we have weights explicitly given by a given source, like the Household Budget Survey or the National Accounts. And from the elementary aggregates, we build the indices for the higher level elements of the system. And in the case of the CPIs produced by IBGE, those are produced using low type formula, which is given here. And the elementary aggregate of the SNPC is the sub-item of a given area, okay? Now, the other essential point in how do we devise the results for the elementary aggregates. And here we need to adopt an elementary index formula. In the case of the SNPC, we have this 2-stage process where for a given sub-item, we split the different products and we tracked for a given product its price in different locations. So those prices are for consecutive months are then we take the price relatives of those mean prices here given by the Duto formula here on the right. And then we need to aggregate those relatives for the different products of the sub-item. And this is done by use of the geometric mean or the Jevons formula, okay? This is the general approach of the sub-items of the SNPC, but there are also special cases that differ from this case. Another important aspect of the approach adopted here is that the indices are produced on a short-term basis, which means that we are comparing consecutive periods, and that means that our base of comparison is not fixed. It's always the preceding period, okay? And if you want to calculate the indices for longer periods, we do this by a chaining of the short-term indexes, okay? We also have other kinds of architectures adopted around the world. So here is an example of typical structure adopted in Europe, extracted from the methodological manual from Eurostat. You can see that they have a much more disaggregated structure, and the elementary aggregates is way defined in a bottom stage of the structure. And also it is interesting to note that the geographical disaggregation that they perform only occurs here also at the bottom, contrary to what we use here. This difference in the system of classification can have important impacts on how you're going to incorporate your alternative data source, okay? Also, there are different formulas that can be adopted or different kinds of chaining. For instance, the direct indices, which compare the prices of a given period T with a fixed period 0, okay? This has disadvantages and advantages. For if you use this approach, one of the disadvantages is that your sample can be depleted and become unrepresentative a long time, unless you perform imputations. But the advantage is that you do not have chaining bias issues. We'll present an example of such kind of index of bias in the future. Okay. There are also other formulas which consider weights, explicit weights for the calculation of your index. Those are very useful if you have this information available. Now there are some data sources that are providing this kind of information, and also multilateral methods that compare multiple windows to compile to provide the results that are also being explored in the frontier of this area. Okay. Oops, sorry. The choice of the best formula will rely on the theoretical and practical aspects of your CPI. So moving on to present a contrast between how we perform the collection via traditional means and via alternative data sources. One of the key points that we need to have in mind is what is a price code. And it is a three-dimensional element or quantity that relies on information on the place or the local that you are going to get information, the specification of the product that you are going to track, and time, which is when you are going to collect the information. Okay. So in order to define these elements, you need to answer 3 questions. The first one regards to where do you collect the information, at what retailer, what's the address, the phone, the site, what are you going to collect, that means what product, and what is the price definition that you are going to use for your product. It's an offer price, available to everyone, etc. How do you collect the information, which means what's the mode of collection that you're going to adopt, at what frequency. And by the end of the day, in a very simplified example, what you want to have is a file like this, that you have information on the local, and a specification of the product, for instance here, kind of rice, and the period of collection where you're going to collect the information here, for instance, the first week of the month. Sorry, I forgot to translate the table to English. So moving on, here at IBGE, these questions are essentially answered by use of different surveys. For instance, the definition of where to collect is given by the survey that visits the establishments, called PLC. It is based on information from retailers, chosen from business frames, the web, the local staff that also visits the retailers, and the field collectors visit a pre-selected sample of retailers to check the adequacy of those for the CPI. As what regards to what to collect, we have a specification survey where the field collectors usually go to the stores and check whether the products are available and what are the most relevant products to collect. Okay, then about how to collect, we typically use most of the case in-person visits, but also adopt email, phone. There are also a collection via manual collection on the web. During the pandemics, apps were also adopted, some information from business registers, etc. And in most of the cases, the frequency of collection is monthly. Now, alternative data sources are rich sources of information for the production of statistics. However, those sources are usually also known as found sources or found data, because the data is not structured for the use of statistics. For the case of price statistics, we have important sources that rose recently and are being considered for CPIs. And the main sources considered today are scanner data. There is data associated to the technology of barcodes, where the retailers have information on associated to this code for the price of the product, when they sold, the quantity sold, at what time, etc. It's very similar to the information that we have here in Brazil at our e-receipts that are in charge of our fiscal authorities. And the other source that is also being considered is the web, which rose with the advent of the e-commerce platforms, okay, sites like those. Important points that we need to have in mind is that even for the same retailer, the price information for different modes, the brick and mortar store, or the web, or the scanner data, can have different characteristics and properties. They might have different geographical breakdown. The concept of price might be different in the web and the brick and mortar stores. We have offer prices in transaction. In scanner data, we have transaction data, the availability of information, and the kind of information that is available, and also the frequency that we can get information. Okay. Here, just a summary of the main contrasts between scanner data and web. Scanner data, you have information on transaction prices. In the web, you have offer prices. Usually, at scanner data, what you get is a file with an average price for the sales of that month, which weighted average price, sorry, since you have information quantities. And then at the web, you can have at most a mean price for the offers that you collect. Also, you have information on scanner data on the data at which the product were transacted. At the web, you have information only on the collection data. You have a difference in how you identify the products, the retailers, etc. I'm not going to detail all of those points. And I'm going to follow here only with the web, since I think it's the main interest of the audience of this event. But I just would like to highlight that scanner data is a more powerful source of information, okay? So, why the web became so attractive for the compilation of CPIs? If you make a quick inspection of a web page of an e-commerce, you can note that you have information on the description of the products, some kind of code. You have information on different prices of the product being offered. And you also may have rich metadata describing additional attributes of the product that can be used for applications in CPIs. So also another key point is that if you take a closer look behind the page of a site, the HTML structure behind this page, you will find the information that is presented for you in a more friendly way in your browser, but the information on the product description, the price, etc., is buried here inside of the code. And in the same way as a browser can access this information, you can also build a program that can access the information, extract it, and organize it in a way that is fit for purpose. The kind of tools that do this are known as web scrapers. And this is interesting because it allows the use of automatic extraction of web data in an efficient and timely manner. So probably the first that pioneered the use of the web for the compilation of Cpis were conducted under the scope of the Billion Prize project at the MIT, where they started to collect massive information from big web retailer chains and try to track the Cpis, official Cpis provided by different countries. And as you can see here on the right, they were successful in tracking the behavior of the official Cpis. And also they were able to show disagreement between the official indices presented in Argentina during a period and the indices that they were compiling, suggesting some that the results compiled officially might have a problem at that time. So after that, many statistical institutes around the world started to look into the use of the web for the production of Cpis. Here are some examples for different countries around the world. We also started to look at this more recently here, a few years ago. Oops. But before you devise a web scraping project, it's important to have in mind what's the goal of your project, since you may have different applications for web scraping. For instance, for official Cpis, you might aim to optimize the collection techniques. This is essentially replace a manual collection for an automatic one. You might be interested in improve the coverage of your Cpi by including web stores on your sample or expanding the varieties of elements of the basket. Also, other methodological improvements like using attributes collected on the web for the derivation of quality adjusted models. You can also enhance the frequency of collection of your data and also study other index formulas, etc. Other use, for instance, build a Cpi that only captures the consumption standards of the web, that's different from inserting the web into the basket of the traditional Cpi. Here, you will need a basket which portrays the expenditures of consumers of the web. Maybe it's a point of interest for NIC and Cetic. You can also build a web index for forecasting of official Cpis, as the Billion Prize project did, and also financial institutions are interested. In this case, you use the web prices, but your basket will probably be the official one. Okay. There is this very nice manual on the guidelines on use of the web scraping for Cpis that was released by Eurostat recently. There's description of several points to consider for the use of Cpi compilation and some countries' experience. Here are some points that I address. So first of all, they also recommend for building a scraper, look if you have access via an API or if you have scanner data. If you do not have these sources, then you should consider developing a scraper, and there are different phases and aspects to consider. In a development phase, you need to consider what's the goal or what's the application, as I mentioned earlier. According to this, what sectors of the baskets or what sites should you consider? That means, what are the products with larger online presence? What's the potential to optimize the collection process? How stable are the sites and representative? To evaluate the site structure and if scraping is allowed. So you need to perform a previous inspection on the site to check if you will not be blocked, or if it's allowed, you're not committing any illegal act. Okay. Also, before devising the script, you can consider whether you are going to make a homemade solution or whether you are going to use third-party services. And if you decide to build it at home, what's the more appropriate approach, if it is a target one or a bulk one. The target approach, it essentially aims to form extraction according to predefined parameters, and the results returns are fit for purpose for the Cpis. The main advantage is that the integration within the Cpi does not require relevant structural or methodological changes. The disadvantage is that it's more limited regarding the use of the data. The bulk approach aims to extract the most of the data available and possibly at higher frequencies. The most advantage is that it uses most of the data, can provide more accurate indicators, but it has several methodological and structural challenges. Okay, identify and develop the scraper. That means evaluate what's the site structure, what's the IT infrastructure that you're going to need. Then there's an analysis and validation phase, where you need, for instance, to control and validate the data collected. That means make sure that the data is being collected properly, that you're collecting the proper variables, that the files have comparable sizes a long time, that you do not have duplications in your data sets, that you're treating your outliers. You also need to get a series of data to analyze your data, since the web do not provide backwards data. So you need to construct a time series, analyze the stability of the site, evaluate methodological changes in case they are necessary. In order to integrate the data and check the methodological changes, evaluate how to integrate the data to your IT systems. If you have methodological changes required, what are them? And also, if we have changes in your IT systems, evaluate what are the new functionalities that are going to be necessary. In case of changes, also test your IT system. And finally, a production phase, which is where you integrate the data to the regular production of your Cpi, and also how you're going to maintain the scrapers in the production process. That is, who is going to fix the scrapers if there are changes in the sites or any problems that rise. Okay. So I now move on to more concrete examples and more overall discussion on the target and bulk approaches. As I mentioned, the target approach aims to extract the products similar to what is done in the manual collection. And here there's a point to consider: what's the scraper that you are going to use. There are different kinds of strategies. You can try to use a generic point-and-click scraper or code one. Generic interface demands more manual work to insert the inputs for the collection. However, it is interesting when the manual work is not very demanding. And it's useful when, for instance, for products that have a centralized collection, which do not rely on a lot of prices, but may rely on different information. And a coded scraper is most used, for instance, for monopolized sectors or sites that concentrate a large amount of information, and interesting for cases where the manual collection is demanding. So here's a nice example of a generic interface, which was built by the National Institute of Statistics by the Netherlands, which is the robot tool. As you can see here, it's there is this very friendly interface where you can insert information on the item that you're going to collect, and then insert some inputs as the name of the item, the address, the website, and then you need to inform some a parameter that can locate where is the price information inside the site. Once you've done this, you just click on a button here and it will extract the collection whenever you want. Okay. Oops. For the other choices, if you want to build a scraper by code, important tools for this are the R and the Python, which have dedicated libraries for devising web scrapers, which are here described. Here are some examples of some coded scrapers that we devised here at IBGE, for instance, for the affairs. You note that usually the traditional collection was performed manually, already on the websites of the companies, of the affair companies, by the local units. Here the inputs are well defined, like the departure and arrival dates for a given pair of cities and a given profile of tickets. And it's a monopolized market. So it's an interest aspect for the derivation of automatic scrapers here. That's what we've done using R. Here is a result of the analysis phase of the prices collected manually and some prices collected on the web. You can see that the automatic collection could track the prices collected manually very well, and hence we were able to implement this in production at the SNPC since 2020, and this has provided us to save the cost of collecting up to 100,000 prices each month. And the change, note also that the changes here are mainly on how to collect, not on other methodological needs or IT demands. Okay. Another example, which was also derived recently, was an improvement on the coverage of our basket. Since our last HBS, we found representative weight for ride-sharing services, here, as you can see here, though they are not large. You can see they are also comparable to the weight for taxi services. They also have shown representative in most of the areas of the covered by the CNPC. Then we were faced with the three questions: what to collect, when, and how here. So one of the key aspects to derive a solution was to take a look at how those services are priced. They are essentially rely on three main components. Two of them classify as rigid components, since they do not change very fast, which are the base rates, which are the tax for kilometers, and booking fees, which are related to operational costs of the companies, and a flexible component that is related to a dynamic multiplier according to difference in consumers' demand and supply of the services. So different approaches can be developed based on the price components that you consider. If you consider only the rigid components and build an expression like this one here, you have a pricing strategy similar to what is adopted for the taxi services. However, may not be taking into account the market dynamics of the sector, since the prices change a lot in a very small window of time. And also, you may not be getting a geographical breakdown very accurate, since these components will usually change as a general policy of the companies, and will generally when they change, the change will occur generally at the same time for all the areas. So we were considering if we could devise a solution that could track this behavior. Ideally, we would like to have transaction data for that, but web could allow us an interesting alternative solution due to the presence of those sites that allows you to simulate the price of a given ride, or again, similar to what you do for the case of airfares. You insert a set of inputs and you get the price of the services. And this is what you are interested. So I'm not going to detail how we define the products. Here you can have the information, but here are the results that we have in production since January 2020. And as you can see, the indexes are able to track the price evolution for the different areas, which are also consistent, I think, and in a timely manner, and which seems much more precise than just considering the rigid components. Okay. Regarding the bulk web scraping, I just want to give an overall view of the main challenges of using this approach. So this approach aims at collecting the large amount of products available as possible, eventually also making collection at higher frequencies, weekly, daily, hourly, and it's mostly used in cases like clothing, electronics, food and beverage, transportation, etc. But there are a lot of challenges that you need to consider. The first one in regards to classification, as you can note here, for instance, if you select to download or scrape all the information for pants, male pants in the site, you get information for more than 500 products. And in the manual collection, you usually only collect a few units. If you have this amount of information, you probably will not be able to classify them in the structures of your CPI manually. So you need to devise classification tools in order to say that the men's jeans here should go to men's jeans, twill pants should go to twill pants, etc. And in order to do that, you might need to derive some classification strategies to do that. There are different approaches according to the different sectors to consider. For instance, you might be able to use the classification structure of the websites and to form one-to-one correspondence in some cases. In others, you need to rely also on the attributes or the prices, on some keywords of the descriptions to classify the information, or you may also need more difficult strategies as the use of machine learning and natural language process models to classify your information. You should also have in mind that even using these automatic strategies, you also have some manual work to train your data sets and to validate the results. Another important aspect here is that for some sectors, you have this fluctuation and decay of the matching of the products in your sample, since products can live and enter the market for different reasons, sometimes in a permanent way, and this can lead to data churn and attrition of the data set. And for chain indices, this can lead to a high downward bias, as you can see here for the comparison of these web indices and the official CPIs. This essentially occurs because for some sectors, like clothing, the products are inserted into the market with higher prices, and as they go out of the market, the prices decreases. And if you do not find an appropriate replacement for the new product that is entering the market, if you do not link an old product to a new one that is similar to it, you only get this decreasing pattern that is shown here. Okay. So there is different approaches to try to deal with this problem. One of them is try to make a match of the new products to the products that were present in the previous season, based, for instance, on a similarity function, as this approach here. As you can see, after implementing the approach, the results seem much more close to the results that are provided by the official Cpis. Though this matching, direct matching that is provided was provided previously, also you can miss a lot of pairs. So another approach is not to use a single product, but define a homogeneous group of products to track a long time. So instead of using a single product, pursue the mean price of a different group of products. So there are different methods to build these aggregates, in general based on characteristics, attributes, and prices. And you should have in mind the trade-off between the level of homogeneity of the aggregates and the matching a long time in order to build your aggregates, okay? Also, if you perform higher frequencies collection, you have to perform an aggregation of your prices in order to provide daily prices, for instance, by the use of an arithmetic or geometric mean of the prices collected daily, for instance. Also, if you use homogeneous products, you need also to aggregate the prices of the products inside of the aggregate to derive a unit value price of the aggregate. And then finally, you need to use an elementary price index formula to combine the different products or homogeneous products to devise your elemental aggregate indices. Okay, then you have different approaches. The most traditional ones rely on bilateral formulas, which, for instance, the Jevons or Dutot. You can also try to use multilateral formulas based on without weights. But also a theme of current research is the derivation of weights for web prices, since if you use all the products of the store, some of those products are well representative of the consumer habits, but you may also have many products that are rarely sold. So if you treat them equally, you might introduce bias into your CPI, and hence there are some studies trying to devise some proxy weights for web, like the use of the sum of the prices for a given time window where a given product was collected. Okay. Another key aspect is how you're going to incorporate your web data into a classification system. So depending on the way you incorporate the data, you have different uses, and you can use more or less the data collected. For instance, if you integrate at a given upper level, upper level, for instance, garment for men, you can use all the formation for garment for men collected for web, for instance. If you integrate at a product level, as in the right panel here, you only be restricted to use information for jackets. Here is an example of a proposal for vision of the building the indices for following all those stages. You see here at the first stage, you have the prices for the different days for a given item, then different items can be combined into homogeneous products, and homogeneous products then are finally combined to a given product segment, and different product segments of a given retailer are then combined to produce the CPI for a given retailer. Another example here from the ONS in UK, more aggregated than the last one. It's interesting here to see that they have created this additional segment in the classification system, which is similar to this product segment defined here, but they define it above of the stores. Here you can see that it was defined below. It's also interesting to note that different approaches are being proposed by different countries. And also it's interesting to see that they perform a breakdown regarding the type of data source that is being considered in their CPIs. And according to the data source, there are also different breakdowns according for instance, the geographical disaggregation. Okay, for instance, the web, there is only a national breakdown. So finally, my conclusions.
Sorry for interrupting, just to tell you that you have 3-4 minutes, so you have time for questions.
Okay,
I understand you are finishing. Thank you very much.
So use of alternative data source provide a great opportunity for the compilation of CPIs. However, there are several aspects that you need to take into account beyond collection regarding the kind of source that you are going to use and how you are going to use the data. The targeted approach is much more harmonic, though more limited. But bulk web scraping allows greater use of data, but may require profound changes in the CPI structure. I did not consider it here, but there are also potential use for other price statistics like the ICP program, though other challenges may rise. Before I end, just a note on this project, which is being conducted by the UN. There's a task force work of experts from different countries aiming to provide different products for the use of alternative data sources for CPI. There are different work streams working on this project. And essentially, the idea is to provide material for persons around the world to rely on in order to use these data sources, also codes for using these data sources and some training platforms. I believe that in the next year, there will be a ebook available with this content. There is also some functionalities of a package devised in R by Jacek Bialek that you can already use, which is available at the ArcRAN, but should also be available on the UN platform. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vladimir, for your presentation. And you brought to us not only the challenges, but also the need of methodology and all the work and innovative work that is necessary to keep doing and keep producing high quality official statistics. And also we know that you and your team and other teams in IBGE are always also trying to cope and to do and to promote innovation in order to be able to keep the production in these difficult times and improve the production for the future. There has been so many issues that you raised that is always so almost funny and naive with people just like one simple question, ask a simple question, say, but why do you collect data and do not use web scraping? And then you have an hour and a half just with, you can have at least, you didn't have it, just with the challenges. And then you ask, are you really asking this as a simple question? So it's really enlightening that you can lead us to all these challenges that we need to face and how IBGE and other offices are doing it. We have some questions for you. So some are in Portuguese and some are in English. So I will present them in the original language that was presented by the audience. Question 1, that's in Portuguese, is from Moisés Bird, asking, muitas compras pela internet possuem...
Many purchased by the internet, they have some additional freight costs. Does that take into account IPC measures? If not, how do they take that into consideration? This is one of the questions.
I think you can respond in Portuguese because there is...
Should I answer that in Portuguese or in English?
Bom, obrigado pela pergunta, então, Moisés. Esse é um aspecto...
Thank you, Moisés, for your question. And this is a quite interesting and difficult aspect to address. To start with, you may embed that or not. In the example I shared here, we haven't got this factor included as there was no freight included, but usually that is not taken into account. That example I gave you in the UK, that there is a national domestic price, so you don't need to take into account shipment or freight. That is a methodological question, and there is not one single answer for that. And moreover, we are after price variance and not the absolute price. In fact, if we capture price variance correctly, that will not be a problem. But if we have too much variance in the freight price, that may be a problem.
So I will give the floor to him, so he will ask this question.
Thank you, Denise, and congratulations, Vladimir. This is excellent presentation, very inspiring, and congratulations to IBGE for moving into new alternative techniques. My question is about machine learning algorithms and intelligence, artificial intelligence. If IBGE is already working on those areas to improve the efficiency of web scraping techniques, as you very well explained. And I would like to take this opportunity to, you have mentioned the task force and big data from the UNSD, you mentioned scanner data, but I also would like to mention that IBGE has made very good contributions to the subgroup on mobile data, using mobile data from Rio City to produce ICT indicators. So this is another subgroup of the group that you mentioned on big data for official statistics that is working with new data sources. But congratulations, and if we can please explain if IBGE is working with machine learning algorithms, I appreciate. Thank you.
So thank you, Alexandre, for your question. Yes, we are considering the use of machine learning. We have also a project on classification of the products for CPI that we are running in a project, the machine learning group of the UNECE. There's this round in 2021, and we are also participating in it, and one of the applications is to use machine learning and natural language processing techniques to classify products into the sub-items of the SNPC. Okay, so that's that's the projects that we have this application of. It's also nice to know this other initiative of IBGE in other testing of the UNSD. So thank you for.
Okay, I will continue. We have another question from Moisés Band. and I will ask it in Portuguese since it's written in Portuguese. Como atribuir o valor?
Yes. How can we give a product value to a digital marketplace to a proper consumer's profile, such as access, resource, procurement, behavior? How to consider it?
Essa é outra excelente pergunta, né?
This is another excellent question. Marketplace will allow you to get price information from different sources. So ideally, we would like to have the store's weight to be able to include them. And in the UNSD task force group, there is no closed or concluded recommendation as how to deploy such information, but the idea is to consider the main retailer prices, such as Loja Americanas, which is a large retailer chain, to follow prices. And to have a rather detailed information, we should learn more about price information from who is selling that. Then we would be able to follow that offer throughout time and eventually prices without any bias, because a small store cannot have the same weight as a large retailer. So we still have to learn more about that and to provide some additional surveys.
MBS, are you offering trainings on web and scanner data to countries, either online or offline? So I believe that's the question is for you, but also from people from NIC.br, or if you know any that are available, that is available.
There will be courses in this platform of the UN that are being derived for the use of scanner data and web. We here at the IBGE do not have any courses available yet, but that might be something to consider. I don't know, maybe in the scope of the hub of the big data hub at ENCE. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have time for one more question, but while you think, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have more of the workshop, and we are waiting for you at 10 o'clock for our next session that will be on public statistics on AI. So it's public statistics about artificial intelligence, and you can check our website for the program of the next 2 days. There is some comments here in the chat thanking Vladimir for the great talk, and it is nice that we had the opportunity to discuss and have questions, and this is it's a forum and it's very lively. So I believe if Alexandre agrees with me that it's 12:30 on perfect time, that we had a very nice session with 2 very nice presentations and expert speakers, and the audience has been with us adding this nice touch for the debate. So I would like to thank everybody and tell you and the others that are registered and people that may register for tomorrow that will be here the same time, same place tomorrow waiting for you for a very nice session. Alexandre, you want to say goodbye to close it?
Thank you, Denise, for the moderation, and Marcelo, Peter, and Vladimir, excellent presentations, and we are looking forward for tomorrow's webinar on big data for official statistics. Waiting for you. Keep with us. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.